Hi Sam, I'm Gene Gustafson, and you asked me a question about my disability. Primarily it's a spinal cord injury, but it was caused by a tumor that was caused by cancer. So I had a couple things on my plate. It was very abrupt when it came on last July, about 13 months out from the episode. And the episode was that the little tumor scratched my spinal cord, and that makes it swell up, but there's no room to swell inside vertebrae, so you get a spinal cord compression incident. And it disabled my legs completely to nothing. Couldn't feel a thing, couldn't move a thing in an hour's time. And that was very sobering. Plus going into the ER and getting a diagnosis of cancer, plus being plumped in the hospital for 110 days. Now, as you can see, I'm out, and we'll add more to that story on the next segment. How did that one take?
What were some of the frustrations you encountered after being placed in a high-level care foster care home?
At first, high-level care was absolutely necessary. I could hardly move from bed, but I did get transfers down before they keep stepping down your levels in proportion to what your abilities are. So I started to pick up more abilities. Mercifully, I got some sensation back in my legs, and then I got enough muscle strength that I could make independent transfers to wheelchairs. And boom, suddenly got the world back. I could go out in natural air and see sunlight, and that was magic after 7 weeks in a hospital bed. The frustration was that I started to get a whole lot better, and the system isn't really too well geared to recognize people getting better. That turns out to be a real problem because everybody works in their own little field, and literally it kind of has stone walls at the edge of it, and if you want to jump over one of those, even though we've been at this for decades, there aren't really smooth transitions built in, and so people want to do high-level care and you can't do a thing, and then you're stuck in high-level care and you can't do things. Suddenly you can start to do a lot of things, and people will actually push you back because it's going to ruin their playing field in some way, and they have to deal with that. First way is, maybe you should just never stand up again. And that wasn't going to make it. I was already standing up before I got there, and then my standing got a whole lot better, and the frustration was that the system could not get its head around that in any meaningful way. I had a case manager who happened to be from one pool with a cuckoo's nest, and Nurse Ratchet really wanted to push me back, and I actually credit her with getting me a lot better because there was no way that I was going to die in captivity. That kind of weird movie scene kind of thing, and my body just rebelled, and we're out of here. So the frustration is there's too much care when people get rolling on the care thing, and there's too little understanding of how to make a transition and how to help the patient along. The institutions are real good at knowing what they do, but what they do isn't necessarily what you want to do, and if you need to do something, there are some hurdles in the way.
That brings me to the next question. Did you get any support, help from agencies in the community during your stay in the care home?
I did. I had a lot of encouraging conversations with people on the telephone, and a lot of, no, we don't do that, or no, you can't do that while you're in foster care home, or no, that service is waitlisted, or I don't think I was ever actually too old for anything, but I might have been too young for a couple of things. And the net result was that it was nice to have a little bit of encouraging words along the way. It was really a problem nobody could actually deliver a service that I needed in any kind of meaningful way. And the most disappointing thing is that even though my predicament got worse and worse and worse, and I kept reaching out to agencies. Fortunately, I had my faculties about me to do this. I can look up state law, and I can read the statutes, and I can see what the regs are, and I was kind of mystified by some of the miscare that I was getting in my care. And I got to get things going, but I pretty much had to do it on my own. I was too small of potatoes for the disability rights folks, and I was too in foster care, so a lot of the county agencies and whatnot, they don't have any access to you, or vice versa, if you've got this another big stone wall in between. Nice people provided me a lot of encouragement along the way, bought me some time, and over days and days I was getting better and better. So the encouragement and hope factor was very meaningful, and the actual services were completely unmeaningful. And with that said, things finally came to a head. What's the next question?
Were you made aware of resources in the community?
Somewhat. Yeah, I mean, if I hadn't taken a heck of a lot of initiative on my own, I wouldn't have. But the primary way the resources came to me is that I was watching like a hawk. See, when you're in captivity, you don't get to get out on your own. It doesn't matter how healthy you are. I mean, I was getting pretty darn good, and I could have called a cab, gotten in it myself, including the wheelchair, I mean, I was getting it down, and people were saying, no, 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 can. And so the only times I got out were the doctor's appointments, which were great, and the doctors' offices are filled up with brochures that'll give you access to this and that, and then to websites for various agencies. And it's a pretty big maze. It's amazing how big, how many different agencies, and how you don't really know whether or not you qualify or not, and how much kind of outreach you have to do. Sometimes you hit a phone maze and you go, ooh, I don't think I have the time to get this kind of help here, because that's pretty much a clue that it's going to dead end somehow, and you get kind of a radar for what can and can't happen. Mostly I looked on brochures, mostly I looked on the web. Mostly people didn't tell me anything or go, hey, there's this great thing you can do with your life now that you got some life back in you. It was easy to get over cancer because you leave that in the hands of the doctor. Prostate cancer, they can just smack that down. I was pretty impressed. A little harder to get over radiation therapy, but people do. You know, you get radiation sick and then you get radiation well again. So that worked out, and I got pretty good about these legs, partly because they came back and partly because I learned all the strategies that I watched YouTube videos and saw people with cerebral palsy dress themselves completely with no use of their hands. And I'm going, I think I can get my socks on today. Okay. That kind of encouragement is a lot more meaningful than anything that's coming from my immediate environment. You kind of lose a therapeutic environment when you go from a congregate living thing where you got 40 people professionally trained to a much smaller kind of setting where you will not have that many people. And they might not be that well trained, so you really have to keep, there was a way, I didn't know that kind of dip was coming, and I had to kind of push forward. Fortunately, my primary care physician said, you want some physical therapy? And I said, yes, I do, because I was getting really, really stiff. By the time the hospital people got me into the wheelchair, they were kind of done with the project. Everybody has a certain, they go up to their own wall, and they don't even have to look over the other wall. It's just a matter, hey, we got you engaged. In fact, literally, the day that I left my extended care and someone was going to pick me up to take me to foster home, I had never actually rehearsed getting out of the wheelchair into a vehicle. But do you think I was going to bring it up at that point? No way. I said, no, I think I got this one. I got this one. It was like a secret strategy that I'm not going to get in my own way on the way out. And that's really important. The biggest thing that got in my own way was 3 pounds of brain material. Here's my body coming back strong. I'm getting recovery on all kinds of fronts. I got trillions of cells who are going, hey, we're still healthy, and they're getting with the game. And I could hardly get over the fact that I had cancer and paralysis, and I'm 61, and it was a great life, and maybe this is how you just check out. And that part of my brain really got in the way of recovery. I got to urge anybody who's watching here to try to set that part aside, especially if you find a majority of your cells going in the right direction. That's the vote that matters. Take your own head out of the way.
Jean, how did you hear about Aloha Independent Living Hawaii?
Well, I got pretty adamant about trying to get some more civil rights back. I could not believe that the Constitution and human rights and everything else just, boom, it was gone. No, lay down, don't go anywhere. No, you can't volunteer. No, you can't do this. Anyway, that doesn't even sound like American. It doesn't sound like me. I was a free-range chicken for 60 years. I'm not going to lie here. Getting better and tell me that, what if they were the last months of my life? Am I supposed to just like lay down and die in captivity? Very, very strange. So with that kind of energy in my head, I went onto the web and found disability rights organizations. And apparently I was too small a fish to fry. They take on different tasks. But in the process of that, I met someone who referred me to AILH. And that was you.
Yep.
That was a fortuitous circumstance. And I'll tell you what really made a difference. A, people from independent living will come and see you. When you got to go through a phone maze to get somebody who's not even going to come and see you, you get pretty discouraged, especially sitting in a little bungalow trapped on a hillside, practically, well, it is imprisonment. And in fact, I couldn't even make bail. And in fact, there had never been any due process against me. Nobody adjudicated me that I was disabled. But by the time you get disabled, there's this kind of global attribution of defect, as I call it. People would look at, and I live in a culture here that has a lot of black hair. You get someone with white hair, you know they're 114 years old. So there was several strikes against me. That, and you can't get too vociferous about trying to state your right, or what? They're writing the chart notes, and suddenly you just sound like a crazy old man, and you're going to lay down a track record that is going to work against you. So I had to be kind of subtle, and that's why I reached out to disability rights. And when they said, no can, but they gave me a referral, I went, oh, back to the main point. Independent living people will come and see you. And the other thing is, They leap stone walls in a single bound. You can go 2 and 3 with them. They will come with you on the process. And when you get slammed back from a state of, like I say, free-ranging to as far disabled as I was, one of the first things you learn is you are not going an inch forward without people on your side. You can't just solo it or tough it out or, all-American male that thing done. You would better find some people. And right away you notice people who are either just working inside their field and they're going to quit right at the edge, or people who don't hardly even care that much, all the way to people who really care about the real thing, which is that you should have a life with some dignity and honor. And even if it is your death, that should be dignified and honorable. Or you should at least have a shot at it before you just go down. And not too many people will tell you that. A whole lot of people don't have the thread of continuity and a real understanding of what the basis of humanity is that says, this is the core. Like I say, cancer hardly set me back a bit. Sick, well. Paralyzed legs, I got 20-30% back, and that's enough to do some stuff with. But imprisonment, wow, that was almost fatal. That's the kind of stuff that has you thinking about suicide. And then you start thinking about suicide, you go, well, if I'm willing to do that, I'm willing to do one more thing here. And then you find out that it's kind of a hostage situation, because if you start making a move like, geez, I'm going to call a cab and take a ride today because I need to see a friend, and you can't prevail upon these people to do things that they're not contractually required to do. But damn, I'm going to walk up the block today, and that was my big rebellion, because maybe that'll bring some powers that be here. I would love to have a discussion with a cop right now. Somebody, bring me a person. You cannot get a person, on the phone or through agencies. So I was going to raise the stakes and take a outlaw walk up the block. Jesus, cats can cross the street, and I can't cross the street. There are people out on parole from felonies, and people out on bail accused of felonies, and they're all over the place. They can go anywhere, and I can't cross the street. So by the time I got really depressed, that led to the thought of, well, let's try something first. You don't just throw the anchor down and possibly put up a sail. And in the process of going for it, I got more enthusiasm back. You have to be kind of pushed to the bottom to decide to come back up. When you decide to come back up, you need allies. Main point is you're not going to do it alone. It doesn't matter how heroic it seems like you're going to make that. Pick up some independent living people, because they'll take it all the way through.
Jean, how has working with Aloha Independent Living positively impacted your life?
Oh, it's been everything for me. I spent 4 months in the hospital and then 6 months in foster care, which was an extension of the hospital. Nobody bothered to tell me that before I elected hospital. There were other things about my previous life that kind of blew up, so I couldn't go back to the life that I had before. I was an able-bodied caretaker, and disabled, I had no caretaker positions to be in anymore. So I had to find a new life, from really scratch. Not a lot of resources and not a lot of good health at the moment. Aloha Independent Living, here's the deal, when it was time for me to jump ship, and I was practically pushed out of the foster care because I was somehow disloyal because I wanted to be independent, and I had gone to my doctor and said, give me independence. I had to get an apartment on my own. Fortunately, I finally got the authorization to take cabs for the last 10 days there. I got the business done, and there was no one to help me with basic things like a bed, a commode chair, the ability to have someone to call even, as I'm suddenly living completely isolated and on my own. That was a tough transition. I got one thing to add. Every transition took about 6 weeks to adapt to. First, it's the most devastating thing in the world. Landing in the hospital, landing in extended care, landing in foster care, and even landing here, back in freedom. That's a glorious high. On the other hand, there's a lot of work involved, and when you think you're kind of assailed by a lot of things. Depression and ill health and not a lot of energy, and I'm not really sure what the prospects of the future are, so how hard should you actually be trying in the first place? All of those things tend to make it an ordeal, and Aloha Independent Living helped me a lot. A, because they can deliver something in one day that you're not going to get through your insurance company or some other thing for 9 weeks, literally. And you need that stuff in the first day. I would not have made it if Sam hadn't come through and said, here, we got that, we got a place where we store them, and when people need them, we bring them. And that kind of stuff is fantastic, because that doesn't exist elsewhere. That's how independent living helps.
Thank you, Jean, and thank you for talking to us.
It's been a pleasure.